Here is a detail about Roswell that almost no one talks about. In the summer of 1947, more than a dozen people said they touched it, held the debris, saw the bodies, sat in the room, and within a few years, nearly every one of them told the same strange story, that someone came to their door, that they were told to stop talking, and that if they were smart, they would forget they had ever been there at all. This is the account of the people who saw too much at Roswell, and what happened to them afterward. Because the debris is not the strangest part of this story. The people are. We'll start with the one they tried hardest to erase, a young base nurse, and a phone call to a funeral home that no one has ever fully explained. Keep that phone call in the back of your mind, because it might be the most disturbing part of all of this. Let's start where every version begins, with an ordinary week that wasn't. The Roswell Army Airfield, summer of 1947. This was the most secretive base in the country, home to the only atomic bomb group in the world. Security here wasn't a policy, it was the air people breathed. You did your job, you kept your head down, and you never asked what was behind a door that was closed to you. Into that world came a young nurse, barely out of training, the kind of person who wrote letters home every Sunday and noticed everything and repeated none of it. For a few days, the work was routine. Sprained ankles, summer colds, paperwork. And then one morning, the entire base changed at once. She described it as a sudden pressure. Vehicles moving where they shouldn't. Officers she'd never seen, giving orders no one dared question. A wing of the base that was open yesterday, sealed today. Guards posted where there had never been guards before. And under all of it, a smell. Sharp, chemical, a smell she could never name and never forgot. Something had come in from the desert, and the men carrying it were afraid. She was pulled in to assist, not chosen, not trusted with anything. She was simply the nearest medical staff to a room that had to be cleared of everyone who didn't already know. Wrong place, wrong minute. Before I tell you what she saw, one warning. Almost none of this can be proven. The military says this woman never existed under the name we've been given. Keep that doubt with you, hold on to it, because you're going to need it later. Here is what she described. A room she was not meant to enter. Harsh light, and shapes on the tables covered over. And doctors who did not look like men doing a procedure. They looked like men who did not understand what they were looking at. Men who kept stepping back. Men who went quiet. Whatever lay on those tables was small, too small, she thought, and wrong in a way she struggled to explain for the rest of her life. She never described it the same way twice. She only ever said that it did not belong in any hospital she had trained in, and that smell from the hallway was strongest here, strong enough that two of the doctors walked out. She was in that room for only a few minutes, long enough to hand over instruments, long enough to be seen, and long enough to notice the one thing that would define everything that came next. There was a camera in that room. Ask yourself something. If that film ended up in your hands, and you already knew you were never supposed to be there, what would you do with it? Hand it over and pray they forget your face? Or keep one frame, just one, as proof you weren't losing your mind? The story insists she kept a frame, or made a copy, or told the wrong person what those pictures showed. The details change with every teller. The ending never does. Within days, she was gone. Transferred overseas, on paperwork that all looked correct. So fast that the friend she wrote to every week came looking, and was simply told she had shipped out. Then the letters that friend kept mailing began coming back. Unopened. Marked undeliverable. And finally the friend was told the young nurse had died. An aircraft accident. No details. No passenger list. No grave. No record that decades of searching could ever confirm. Think about that. Somewhere a friend kept writing letters to a person the world had quietly deleted. Now, that phone call, the one I told you to remember. The man who first told her story wasn't a soldier. He was a young mortician at a Roswell funeral home, the one that also handled bodies for the base, and his strange week started with the telephone. Someone from the airfield called him. They wanted to know if he could supply small caskets, child-sized, sealed if possible. Then came the stranger question. How would you preserve a body that had been lying out in the elements for days without damaging the tissue for a later examination? Ordinary questions on the surface. Except no one would say who the caskets were for, and no children had died in Roswell that week. None. That same day, he drove out to the base on a separate call, and in a corridor he wasn't supposed to be in, he says he passed a nurse he knew. She was hurrying. She looked like she had been crying, and as she passed him, she said just enough to freeze him where he stood. Leave. Get out of this building. Forget you were ever here. For your own sake. When he went back to look for her, she was gone, and the base had no record of the name. Here is what makes this more than one strange story. She was not the only one who saw too much that summer, and she was not the only one who paid for it. Consider the rancher who found it first. He was out checking his land after a storm when he found the field scattered with debris that did not behave like anything he knew. Material that did not act the way material should. Strange to hold, stranger to break. He brought a piece into town to show the sheriff, and within a day he was not a rancher with a strange find anymore. He was a man in military custody, held for the better part of a week. When he finally came out, his story had changed completely. He had found a weather balloon, he said now. Just a weather balloon. For the rest of his life, he told his own family that whatever he had really found, he had been made to understand he should never talk about it again. Consider the officer, the intelligence officer from the base, the man they sent to collect the debris. He held it in his own hands. He was so certain it was not of this world that he let a local reporter photograph the story. The headline went out to the whole country. The military had recovered a flying disc. And then, within hours, the officer was made to stand in front of cameras beside a torn-up weather balloon and take it all back. Colleagues said he never fully recovered from it, that he spent decades insisting, quietly, to anyone who would listen, that what he held that day was not a balloon, and that he had been ordered to lie to the entire world. Do you see the pattern forming? A nurse who vanished. A rancher who was detained until his story changed. An officer forced to recant on camera. 3 people, 3 different jobs, and the same machine closing over each of them, turning what they saw into something ordinary, or turning them into someone who never saw it at all. So let's be honest with each other, because you deserve that, and this channel won't insult you. The nurse cannot be traced. The military says the name the mortician gave never matched any record. Investigators found no enlistment, no transfer order, no accident report. That is not a small gap. It's the kind of gap that sinks most stories completely. And anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. But here is what keeps people awake at night. The rancher was real. The officer was real. Those 2 men are documented, named, photographed, on the record. And their stories carry the same fingerprint as the nurses. Something found, something official, and then a sudden, total effort to make it all go away. That doesn't prove there were bodies on a table. Rumors copy themselves. Memories bend toward drama. A detail one person invents becomes a detail the next person swears they saw with their own eyes. But it raises the one question Roswell has never been able to answer. If there was nothing out in that desert, nothing at all, then why did so much effort go into silencing the people who were simply standing near it? Think about what that silence actually costs. Every one of these people carried something out of that summer. The rancher carried what he really found in his field, and the nurse, if she existed, carried an image on a strip of film and a memory of a room out into a life we cannot follow. None of it came back to us. Not the film, not the truth the officer swore he'd been ordered to bury, not whatever the rancher understood in that week of custody that made him go quiet for the rest of his life. It exists, if it exists at all, only inside people who were pressured into silence or erased before they could break it. And that is the part I can't put down. We tell the Roswell story as a story about a crash, but maybe it was never really about the debris. Maybe it was about the people, about how quickly a person who sees too much can be turned into a person who saw nothing at all, about how a name comes off a roster, how a story becomes a weather balloon, how a witness becomes a rumor. She left no diary, no photographs anyone can produce, no grave anyone can visit. She barely left a name, just a friend who never got a reply, a mortician who spent his life insisting she was real, and a question that has outlived everyone who could have answered it. What did they make her forget? And how many others were there, in how many other rooms, whose names never even made it far enough to be erased? If she stayed with you the way she stays with me, then stay a little longer, because the officer's story doesn't end where the newspapers left it, and the rancher's family kept talking long after he stopped. Their full accounts are next. I'll see you there.